And welcome to the first program in our new year here. We're doing something just a little bit different because Israel was revived as a nation in 1948 against all odds. And America's role in that has been vital, it's been crucial, and that role is most often set by the President of the United States. Now, very recently, news leaked that Barack Obama is thinking of actually placing sanctions on Israel. Now, if this materializes, I simply shudder to think of the consequences to America. We have the warnings out of Genesis 12:3. I'll bless those who bless you, Israel. I'll curse those who curse her. We have the warning of Isaiah 41:11 that those who contend with Israel shall perish. So, as a watcher of the political climate in America, I decided to assemble a message on how U.S. presidents have treated God's covenant land. And I started with Woodrow Wilson, as he was in office when the Balfour Declaration came about in 1917. That Balfour Declaration was the unofficial birth of Israel, which would later be formalized May 14, 1948. Now, this message was given at David Reagan's annual conference in July in Dallas and at my October Understanding the Times Fall 2014 conference just outside of Minneapolis. And you can now order it on a single DVD. It's 1 hour in length. You can order that for just $15, or you can get it for actually a donation of any amount. You can do that online. You can call us. You can even write. Pastor Carl Gallups opens this presentation. He is P.P. Simmons online, well known. It's a very well-known YouTube site and channel. And that's the first voice that you're going to hear. But this presentation is much more effective on DVD than CD because of the visual images shown. So let's head on over. Carl Gallups introduces this presentation, and then I will come on and share my findings.
On October the 30th, 1991, as President George H.W. Bush is opening the Madrid Conference to consider land for peace in Israel's Middle East role, an impending perfect storm travels 1,000 miles from east to west instead of the normal west to east pattern and crashes into the New England coast. 35-foot waves crash into the Kennebunkport home of President Bush. On August the 23rd of 1992, when the Madrid Conference, moved to Washington, D.C., resumes, Hurricane Andrew, the worst natural disaster ever to hit America up until that date, comes ashore, produces an estimated $30 billion in damage, leaving 180,000 people homeless in Florida. On January the 16th, 1994, President Bill Clinton meets with Syria's President Hafez el-Assad in Geneva. They talk about a peace agreement with Israel that includes Israel giving up the Golan Heights. Within 24 hours, a powerful 6.9 earthquake rocks Southern California. This quake, centered in Northridge, becomes the second most destructive natural disaster to hit the United States, behind Hurricane Andrew. On September the 28th, 1998, as Secretary of State Madeleine Albright works on the final details of an agreement in which Israel would give up land for peace, President Clinton meets with Yasser Arafat and Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House to finalize this land deal. As the meeting happens, Hurricane George pounds the Gulf Coast, causing $1 billion in damage. At the exact time that Arafat departs the country, the storm begins to subside. On November the 30th, 1998, Yasser Arafat comes to Washington again to meet with President Clinton to raise money for a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Clinton promises him $400 million. And on the same day, the Dow Jones average drops 216 points. And on December the 1st, a few days later, the European market had its third worst day in history. Hundreds of billions of dollars of market capitalization were wiped out in the United States and Europe within 3 days. On June the 28th, 2001, the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat achieves a stunning diplomatic coup when he wins the support of the United States for a monitoring force to oversee a Middle East ceasefire. In the months of July and August of 2001, Israel advances several raids into the West Bank in order to stem the tide of increasing violence against Israel. The United States and Great Britain consistently, strongly, and publicly condemn Israel's actions. On September the 10th, 2001, Time magazine announces that Ariel Sharon is under immense pressure. The article notes that Palestinian Yasser Arafat at a United Nations conference just a few days earlier had condemned what he called Israel's colonial racist plot against the Palestinians. On September the 11th, 2001, the first and largest attack on the U.S. mainland occurs, killing over 3,000 innocent U.S. civilians, carried out by Arab terrorists, the mirror of what Israel had been fighting for decades. In August of 2005, Israel carried out the evacuation of 9,500 residents from Gush Katif and 4 Samaria communities. Residents were forced from their homes by Israeli troops, some dragged away kicking and screaming and placed on buses that took them from the area. The withdrawal was backed by the U.S. government and specific declarations and negotiations of President George Bush. 1 week later, Hurricane Katrina made landfall, forcing the evacuation and displacement of hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens. More than 1,800 people lost their lives in Katrina, and more than $81 billion in damages occurred. In November of 2007, the Annapolis Conference convened. In this conference, President Bush was pressuring Israel to accept the roadmap to peace. Under this plan, Israel was being pressured once again to give up land in exchange for peace. Our current economic crisis began in the same month, November 2007. On April the 19th, 2010, Israel was celebrating its Independence Day. On that same day, Fox News reported the Obama administration's shift towards Israel in the UN Security Council. April the 20th, the next day, the Deepwater Horizon rig blew, creating the worst environmental disaster the United States has ever seen. That story is still not over, and that disaster may wind up affecting major parts of the world. Are these 10 disastrous events simply coincidence, or are they the hand and judgment of God? And if they are the hand and judgment of God, what judgments are yet to come as we continue to turn our back on Israel?